The desert mirage. Ravu stood on the highest dune he could find, gazing at the shimmering horizon. He was used to the endless sea of sand that surrounded him, but every day it felt more unforgiving. The blazing sun hung overhead like a ruthless eye, offering no mercy as its heat pressed down on his frail body. Ravu's leathery skin, common to his desert-dwelling people, protected him somewhat, but he still wiped sweat from his forehead as he scanned the empty sky. This was his daily routine: climb the dunes and watch for any movement that might be a wandering beast or a sign of precious water. The days on his homeworld were long and harsh, yet the nights were even colder, forcing his people to master survival through generations of practice. They had no oceans, no rivers, only small hidden wells and the occasional rare oasis. Water was life, and Ravu's tribe guarded their few sources with fierce loyalty. He inhaled the dry air, his lungs craving even the slightest hint of moisture. His thoughts drifted to the stories of ancient times, when his ancestors claimed their world was once greener, before the great shift that turned everything to desert. But for Ravu, it was impossible to imagine anything but sand stretching to the horizon. Shaking off his daydream, he continued scanning the distance. Nothing moved among the dunes, no sign of wind, no travelers, and no storms, just pure emptiness. Suddenly, a flicker of light drew his attention. It was faint, like a tiny star, but it appeared close, far closer than any star in the night sky. Ravu blinked, thinking it must be the sun reflecting off a distant rock. Yet something about this glow seemed too steady. Leaning forward, he shaded his eyes with his hand. The light was moving. It changed direction slightly, not like a falling meteor, but more like a controlled descent. That was enough to spike his heartbeat and send a rush of adrenaline through him. Ravu's mind raced. Had a large piece of debris fallen from the sky, or was it some strange phenomenon he had never witnessed? His people believed that anything unusual could be a sign or an omen. In the past, they had encountered only small spacecraft, usually empty or filled with junk from faraway worlds. But this light appeared alive, as if guided by purpose. A whisper of excitement mixed with fear rose within him. He sensed that this might not be ordinary space trash. Without hesitation, he slid down the dune, careful to keep his footing. The searing sand shifted beneath his boots, each step sending tiny avalanches of grains tumbling ahead of him. His heart pounded with a strange blend of dread and curiosity. If this was something dangerous, he needed to warn his tribe. But if this was something valuable, he wanted to see it first. Treasure or threat, either way, he had to be brave. He trudged across the desert floor, aiming toward the faint glow. Every so often, he paused behind a rocky outcrop or a half-buried boulder to steady his breathing. He peered over the stone, trying to catch another glimpse. The light had grown brighter now, becoming more of a beacon against the dull sand. The sun was still high, so for any light to stand out, it must be powerful. Ravu felt as if he was being pulled toward it, like a moth to a flame. As he moved closer, the wind began to shift. A soft breeze carried the scent of hot metal, sharp and out of place in the naturally dusty air. His nostrils flared. This was definitely something new. The taste on his tongue was tangy, almost electric. Anxiety bubbled in his chest, yet he pressed on, determined to solve the mystery. If he returned to his tribe with only a vague story of a bright light, they might dismiss him or, worse, call him a coward. Soon, he crested another small dune and froze. In the distance, he spotted a sleek, gleaming structure half buried in the sand. It looked like a smooth, silver capsule about the size of a large hut. Its surface reflected the harsh sunlight, making it almost painful to look at directly. If it was a ship, it was unlike any he had seen before. No sharp edges, no obvious seams, just a seamless shell of polished metal. Ravu crouched behind a rock, his breath shallow. From this vantage point, he saw movement at the base of the strange craft. Something was happening, but he could not make out the details. Were there beings inside? What kind of creatures would come to such a desolate planet? His heart thundered as he imagined a dozen scenarios, each more alarming than the last. Perhaps they were raiders searching for resources, or maybe they were explorers on a cosmic journey. The possibilities swirled in his mind. He inched closer, crawling on his elbows, every nerve on high alert. The wind blew sand into his face, but he barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the shining vessel. The air felt charged, as if a silent storm was brewing. Then he saw it clearly. The metal exterior slid open, revealing a dark interior. A tall figure emerged, armored in a suit that glistened under the sun. Ravu's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen such a shape. The limbs were long, but the overall outline didn't match any desert creature he knew. In that moment, he realized this was something far beyond his experiences. The figure stepped onto the sand, turning its head slowly as if scanning the environment. Something about its stance suggested both caution and curiosity. A second figure stepped out behind it, similarly dressed. Their movements were slow, careful, almost gentle. They seemed to be examining the desert, not attacking it. Ravu stayed perfectly still, fear and fascination battling inside him. He wanted to run back to his tribe, but he also burned to learn more. His mind swam with questions. Who were these beings? Why had they landed here? Could they speak? Did they understand the value of water in this harsh land? The desert air seemed to crackle with potential. Suddenly, one of the figures raised an instrument. It emitted a soft hum, like a distant insect buzz, and then pointed in Ravu's direction. A chill ran down his spine. Had he been spotted? He pressed himself against the rock, heart pounding. The sweat on his forehead felt cold despite the heat. Everything was silent, except for the distant drone of that instrument. Then, almost as quickly as it began, the humming stopped. The figures turned slightly, facing Ravu's hiding spot more directly. He could feel their gaze, even though he couldn't see their faces through their tinted visors. Time seemed to slow, and Ravu realized he was on the brink of discovery, by them or by fate. He thought about running, but his legs refused to move. In that hush, between the beating of his heart and the swirling desert wind, he understood that his life would never be the same. Uncertain of whether he was prey or participant, Ravu held his breath. The two strangers advanced carefully, and the shimmering light from their ship cast strange reflections on the sand. The moment hung in the scorching air, full of tension and the promise of something extraordinary. Ravu gripped the hot rock with trembling fingers, bracing himself for whatever came next, and in that charged silence, the desert seemed to whisper a single question. What if everything you believe is about to change? Strange visitors. Ravu felt his heart hammer against his ribs as the two strangers turned in his direction. They held strange devices, smooth and metallic, that gave off soft, pulsing lights. He pressed himself against the warm stone, hoping to blend into the desert. Yet every instinct told him he had already been spotted. The sand around him glowed faintly under the midday sun, making any attempt to hide nearly impossible. He dared a glance at the newcomers. Their armor-like suits were dull silver, reflecting slivers of light rather than shining brightly. One figure was taller, with broad shoulders and a steady, confident stance. The other appeared slightly shorter, scanning the area carefully. Through narrow visors, they seemed to be watching everything, absorbing details Ravu's eyes might miss. For a moment, no one moved. Suddenly, a faint hiss broke the silence. The taller figure adjusted something on the side of its helmet. Then, a clear but mechanical voice echoed across the sand. "Is someone there?" Ravu stiffened. The words were halting, as if the speaker was unsure or struggling with the local language. But he understood the tone, a cautious greeting. He swallowed hard, torn between fear and curiosity. His people rarely encountered outsiders, and none had ever used such a device to speak. Could they be dangerous? Could they be friendly? The shorter figure stepped forward, setting aside the scanning tool. That device had seemed like a weapon at first, but now Ravu wondered if it merely measured temperature or life signs. He felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps these newcomers were not here to harm him. Still, he could not ignore the tension in the air, thick and heavy like a storm cloud before it bursts. A sudden movement to Ravu's left startled him. A small desert lizard darted from behind the rock, fleeing into the open. The taller visitor turned sharply, training a bright beam on the creature. The lizard froze under the light, eyes bulging, before it scurried away. Then the newcomer lowered the beam. Ravu realized it was some sort of flashlight or projector, not a lethal weapon. His chest loosened a bit, and he took a silent breath of relief. Gathering his courage, Ravu decided to stand. Sand clung to his elbows and knees as he slowly rose from his hiding place. Cautious but determined, he raised both hands above his shoulders, a sign among his people that meant, "I am unarmed." He hoped the strangers would interpret it similarly. The wind brushed a soft trail of dust across his feet. The two figures paused, as if unsure how to respond. Then, the taller one placed a gloved hand gently on its chest, bowing slightly. Ravu's eyes flicked to the ground, noticing the footprints they left in the sand. They were shaped differently from his own, with a distinct pattern that hinted at advanced boots. The mechanical voice crackled again. "We come in peace." Ravu blinked, realizing these strangers were indeed trying to communicate. He lowered his hands slowly, choosing his words carefully. I do not know your language," he murmured in his own dialect. He felt foolish saying words he was sure they wouldn't understand, but a name or greeting was all he had to offer. The shorter figure removed something from a belt pouch, a small disc-shaped device. They tapped it, and it glowed a faint blue. A moment later, Ravu heard a soft echo of his own words. "I do not know your language." His heart jumped at the echo. Was this disc repeating him? Some kind of translator. Fascinated, Ravu watched as the figure pressed the device again, adjusting a dial. Then the mechanical voice spoke in Ravu's language, albeit in a strange accent. "Greetings. We are travelers from another star." Ravu's mouth fell open. A chill of wonder passed through him. They were truly from beyond the sky, visitors to his desert world. He wanted to ask 100 questions at once, but the shock kept him silent. The taller visitor took one careful step forward, pressing a control on the side of their helmet. The visor slid up, revealing a human face. Pale skin beaded with sweat, a pair of brown eyes shining with curiosity. Ravu stared. He had never seen such features, especially the soft skin and odd hair on the brow. But the gentle eyes somehow put him more at ease than a full helmet could. "I am Captain Lane," the figure said, speaking slowly. The translator disc repeated the words in Ravu's language. "We mean no harm. We need water." At the mention of water, Ravu's breath caught. Water was precious, almost sacred on his world. Was that why they came here? To take what little water was left. He felt a surge of protective instinct, remembering how fiercely his tribe guarded their wells. But as he looked again at the newcomers, hot and weary beneath the desert sun, he sensed desperation, not greed. He replied softly, "Water is rare here." He pointed to the empty horizon, then touched his parched lips, hoping they would understand. The translator's metallic voice echoed, and both visitors nodded grimly. They exchanged glances, as though agreeing on something unspoken. Captain Lane motioned toward the strange craft half buried in the sand. "Our ship, damaged," the translator said, pausing to find the right words in Ravu's language. "We need to fix it. Then we will go." Ravu glanced at the ship, noticing small vents emitting wisps of steam. Even from a distance, he could feel faint waves of heat pulsing around the metal hull. If they were stranded, that meant they might remain in the desert for some time. Ravu wasn't sure how his people would react to newcomers, especially ones who needed large amounts of water to survive. But he also sensed an opportunity to learn. He placed a hand on his own chest. "I am Ravu," he said, speaking his name clearly. He hoped the device would capture it. "I am Captain Lane," the visitor repeated, placing a hand on their own chest. The shorter figure followed with a similar gesture. "And I am Specialist Zhao." Ravu nodded at each name, though the sounds felt foreign on his tongue. Then he stepped a bit closer, mindful of the heat radiating from the ship's engines. A low hum vibrated through the ground, as if the vessel itself was alive. He wondered how it had arrived here. Could it soar through the stars like the birds soared in the sky? He looked at the travelers, seeing the fatigue in their postures, the deep lines of worry on their faces. Something about their vulnerability touched him, despite his caution. He remembered his tribe's strict laws about outsiders. Still, if these strangers needed help, wasn't it right to offer what little guidance he could? Before he could speak again, a sudden gust of hot wind whipped across the desert. Sand sprayed into the air, stinging his cheeks. Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao shielded their faces, stepping back toward the ship for protection. Ravu squinted, scanning the darkening sky. Clouds of dust drifted overhead, a sure sign of an approaching sandstorm. They could be buried if they didn't find shelter soon. He hurried forward, motioning for them to follow him. "Storm is coming," he said quickly, pointing to the swirling horizon. The translator repeated his words, and the visitors exchanged nervous glances. Ravu knew a hidden hollow between two dunes not far away. Maybe it would protect them until the storm passed. He beckoned again, urgency in his movements. Captain Lane nodded, and Specialist Zhao quickly gathered tools. Together, they fled the rising winds, heading away from the open desert. With each step, Ravu felt the grit of sand in his mouth and the sting on his skin. Behind them, the silver ship groaned and clicked, cooling in the thickening air. An unspoken truce formed in that moment. They would weather the storm side by side, strangers thrown together by fate. As the sky darkened and the wind howled louder, Ravu guided them toward a narrow rock formation. His mind churned with questions, but there would be time for answers later. For now, they had to survive. Under the ominous swirl of sand and wind, the three of them found temporary shelter, united by the simple need to endure. Unexpected friendship. The sandstorm howled outside the cramped rock shelter, hurling loose grains against every surface. Inside, Ravu crouched near a jagged wall, keeping a careful watch on his two unexpected companions, Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao. The swirling wind outside sounded like an angry beast, but here in the narrow hollow, the air felt still and almost suffocating. Small flecks of sand still swirled in through gaps in the rocks, stinging anyone who moved too close to the opening. Ravu noted how the humans seemed uneasy but calm at the same time. Captain Lane settled against a stone ledge, pulling off a helmet that was now covered in scratch marks from the swirling sand. Specialist Zhao followed suit, shaking out dust from short, dark hair. Ravu had never seen people like them. Soft faces, fragile-looking skin. Yet they had traveled across the stars to land here, in his desert world. Something about their presence both excited and unnerved him. He tightened the tattered cloth around his own head, hoping to keep sand out of his ears and nose. His people had lived among these dunes for countless generations, evolving thick, leathery skin and hardy lungs. Even so, sandstorms could be deadly if one was caught unprepared. Ravu wondered if the humans realized how dangerous their situation truly was. Captain Lane slipped a small metal device out of a belt pouch. A gentle beep echoed in the shelter. Ravu's eyes darted to the gadget, ready to leap away if it proved threatening. But the device only projected a soft glow onto the rocky floor. Specialist Zhao leaned over, tapping a button that brought the translator disc to life. "Safe, for now," the mechanical voice said in Ravu's language, although each syllable carried a strange accent. Captain Lane nodded, gesturing to the rocky enclosure. Ravu exhaled slowly. "Not for long," he replied. Storms here can last hours, sometimes days. The translator repeated his words in a halting manner, and the humans exchanged concerned looks. Specialist Zhao rummaged through a small pack, withdrawing a metallic canister of water. Ravu watched closely as the human took a short sip, then offered the container to him. Water, such a precious thing, offered so freely. He hesitated. His tribe had taught him to never waste water on strangers. But these strangers had risked their lives descending onto his desert planet. Perhaps a simple sip would not harm him or his people. He accepted the canister carefully and took a measured swallow. Cool liquid slid down his throat, washing away the dryness. He closed his eyes, savoring the relief. When he opened them again, Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao were looking at him with something like kindness in their eyes. Ravu handed the canister back, bowing his head in gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly, and the translator echoed his words back to the humans. The storm roared louder, and a spray of sand rattled against the rocks overhead. Ravu shifted his position, pulling his thin cloak tighter. The humans drew closer as well, forming a small huddle in the center of the shelter. In the tight space, Ravu could see every detail of their gear. He noticed patches on their sleeves, strange symbols he did not recognize. Their boots were reinforced, and their suits had tiny tubes running along the arms and legs. Perhaps they cooled the body or supplied oxygen. Ravu found himself both curious and wary. In the flickering glow of the translator device, Specialist Zhao cleared her throat. "We come from far away," the voice said after a pause. "A place with many oceans, much water." Ravu tilted his head. The concept of oceans, vast bodies of water, seemed impossible in a world where wells ran dry. He recalled an old legend from his tribe, stories of a time when a lake might have existed here, but no one had seen it in generations. "Oceans," he repeated, testing the unfamiliar word. Captain Lane nodded, then tapped a small holographic display on a wrist console. To Ravu's astonishment, a faint image appeared in the air, showing a wide blue expanse that sparkled under a bright sun. Gentle waves rolled, reflecting the sky. Ravu inhaled sharply. It looked like a never-ending supply of water. Seeing so much liquid in one place felt like staring into a dream. That is real?" he asked, voice trembling with wonder. The translation carried his disbelief back to the humans. "Yes," Specialist Zhao replied. "Real. Our planet has many seas and lakes." A moment of silence passed as Ravu tried to imagine such a world. If it were true, then these visitors came from a paradise beyond the stars. His mind flooded with questions. Could water ever run out in that place? Did everyone there have enough to drink? He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. He finally managed a single question. "Why come here, if you have all that water?" Captain Lane's lips pressed into a thin line. "Exploration," the translator droned. "To find resources, to learn, to make friends." The last phrase sounded clumsy in Ravu's language, but it carried a sincerity that touched him. Outside, the storm hammered the rocks in a steady rhythm. Ravu took a deep breath, recalling the ways of his people. They did not trust outsiders easily, yet these humans seemed different from raiders or thieves. They looked more like curious wanderers thrown into a harsh environment by bad fortune. He wondered if they would even survive this storm without his help. Ravu rose cautiously to his feet. The space was cramped, so he had to bend his tall frame. He motioned toward the entrance, where the wind shrieked and spun. "We must wait," he said. "When the storm ends, I can guide you to a small well. It is hidden, but it might help you." Captain Lane's eyes brightened, and Specialist Zhao glanced at the canister of water with relief. "Thank you," the device echoed with warmth. "We will not forget your kindness." A memory stirred in Ravu's mind. His elders always taught that in times of need, all living beings should help each other. Water was precious, but compassion was priceless. Perhaps that teaching held true, even for visitors from the stars. He settled back down, leaning against the rock as the wind raged on. The translator device went quiet, and only the roar of the desert storm remained. Every so often, a new gust would send dust swirling into the hollow, causing them to shield their eyes and cough. Yet a thin sense of comfort began to bloom among them. They were no longer total strangers forced together by circumstance. They had shared water and words, small gestures that bridged the gap between their worlds. At one point, Specialist Zhao pulled out a strange foil-wrapped bar and offered it to Ravu. He hesitated, glancing at the metallic wrapper. Inside was a thick, sweet paste that smelled faintly of dried fruit. Carefully, he tasted a tiny portion. The flavor spread across his tongue, a burst of sugar and energy, unlike anything he had experienced. His eyes widened, and he nodded appreciatively, though the aftertaste was unfamiliar. They continued like that for what felt like hours, exchanging small tokens, exploring the translator's limited vocabulary, and listening to the storm's unforgiving howls. When fatigue finally weighed on Ravu's eyelids, he realized he felt safer than expected, surrounded by these two humans who were so alien yet strangely open-hearted. Eventually, the furious winds began to calm. Sand no longer pelted the shelter with as much force, and the air felt slightly cooler. Ravu stretched, standing to peer outside. The sky was still hazy with dust, but the worst had passed. In a few minutes, it would be safe to move. "We go now?" Captain Lane asked through the translator, voice cracking with hope. Ravu nodded. "We can try," he answered softly. Then, with a cautious but determined step, he led them out of the shelter and into the settling storm. Together, they would face the desert once again, bound now by a shared struggle and an unexpected friendship. Journey to the hidden oasis. The air felt cooler after the storm, yet the desert remained a place of countless trials. Ravu, Captain Lane, and Specialist Zhao stepped out from the rocky shelter and surveyed the shifting dunes. The wind had piled the sand into new shapes, erasing old footprints and paths. Ravu's keen eyes searched for familiar landmarks. His tribe's secret well was hidden somewhere beyond the next ridge. But after a violent storm, navigating became more difficult. Captain Lane brushed sand from the narrow visor of the helmet and studied the horizon. The silver spaceship still stood far behind them, half buried in freshly drifted dunes. Smoke or steam no longer rose from its surface. Ravu guessed its systems had shut down or gone into a standby mode. Specialist Zhao gave the craft a long, worried look before turning to Ravu, as if asking silently, "How will we fix it?" But first, they needed water, and Ravu knew the nearest source was many dunes away. He began leading them across the soft sand. The sun was setting, painting the sky with pink and orange streaks. In a few hours, darkness would bring cold winds. Ravu's tribe believed that dusk was a sacred hour, marking the transition from the punishing heat to the chilling night. Many travelers chose this time to walk because the temperature was less brutal, and the setting sun also helped reveal silhouettes of rocks that could be used as landmarks. At first, the group made good progress. Ravu pointed out firm sand patches where they could step without sinking. The humans followed carefully, relying on him to guide them. Captain Lane tested each step, perhaps surprised by how unsteady the dunes were beneath heavy boots. Specialist Zhao clutched the translator device, scanning the horizon in search of more surprises. Not long into their journey, they heard a low hiss coming from a sandy pit a few meters ahead. Ravu halted abruptly, raising a hand to signal caution. The humans froze, exchanging tense glances. In the fading light, Ravu saw a sinuous shape coiling under the sand, a desert predator known to his people as the Herrick. It was a large serpent-like creature with a thick, armored hide. It often lay in wait for unsuspecting prey, striking with venomous fangs. Slowly, Ravu motioned for the humans to move around the other side of the dune. Captain Lane nodded, and Specialist Zhao gripped a handheld instrument that looked more like a flashlight than a weapon. They followed Ravu's careful path, giving the Herrick a wide berth. A few pebbles slid down the slope, causing the creature to jerk its head up, but it did not leave its sandy nest. Breathing a silent sigh of relief, Ravu led them further away until the hissing faded behind them. "We must keep watch," Ravu said softly. The translator repeated his warning in a stilted voice. "Predators come out after storms, looking for food." Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao exchanged concerned looks, then each made sure they had what little gear they carried. Any illusions they had about a simple desert walk vanished. Despite this, their determination did not falter. They continued to follow Ravu, stepping more lightly than before. As the sky turned a deeper blue, the first stars began to appear overhead. Ravu admired them briefly, thinking how the humans came from one of those faraway points of light. He recalled the holographic image of endless water and felt a pang of wonder. If he helped them survive, perhaps they could show him an ocean up close one day. The idea both thrilled and confused him. His life had been defined by the desert. Imagining other worlds felt like dreaming of magic. Night soon arrived, and with it, a biting chill. Ravu pulled his thin cloak tighter, while the humans activated small heaters in their suits. Specialist Zhao tapped a control on the suit's sleeve, and Ravu heard a faint hum as warmth filled the internal layers of the human's gear. Captain Lane, noticing Ravu shiver, offered a cloth-like wrap from a side pouch. Ravu hesitated but accepted. The material was surprisingly warm, reflecting his own body heat back to him. Another sign of human technology, he thought with gratitude. By midnight, the dunes began to slope downward, signaling they were nearing a rocky plateau. Ravu felt a quiet surge of hope. Beyond that plateau was a narrow valley known only to a few in his tribe. There, hidden behind tall boulders, lay a small oasis with a shallow well. It was not large, but it held enough water to help the humans for now. In his mind, he pictured the glistening pool, imagining Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao's reaction when they first saw it. However, he also recalled his tribe's warnings. Outsiders are not always kind, and sharing sacred water is risky. But Ravu had witnessed the humanity in these two strangers. They shared their own precious water and food with him. They chose not to harm the desert serpent when they might have tried to kill it. And they spoke with genuine respect. His instincts told him it was worth the risk to trust them. They reached the rocky plateau, their feet crunching on pebbles. The wind had died down, and the night sky was a carpet of glittering stars. Specialist Zhao paused, adjusting the translator. "We appreciate your help," the device voiced in Ravu's language, a hint of sincerity in each word. "We know this is dangerous. Your people may not want us here." Ravu nodded but pressed on, stepping carefully to avoid loose stones. He recalled how his tribe might react if they discovered him guiding strangers to the oasis. Yet he reminded himself that Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao did not come to steal or conquer. They needed only enough water to fix their ship or survive until rescue arrived. That was a reasonable cause, wasn't it? A half-hour later, they found themselves at the mouth of a narrow canyon. Moonlight illuminated the tall walls on both sides. Scraggly desert plants clung to the cracks in the stone, their leaves curled tight to save moisture. Ravu's chest tightened as they neared the far end. If memory served correctly, there should be a rocky outcrop blocking the view of the small pool just beyond. He slowed his steps, raised a hand, and whispered, "Here." The translator made a faint click, repeating, "Here." Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao peered over the rocks. Their eyes went wide at the sight of trickling water collecting in a shallow pool. Even in the dim moonlight, the surface shimmered gently. Strayed reeds and grasses, starved by the endless drought, still found a way to survive around its edges. Specialist Zhao's face lit up with joy, and Captain Lane's tense shoulders relaxed. Ravu could almost feel the wave of relief passing through them. This oasis was more than just a water source. It was proof of hope in a world that seemed barren. For Ravu, it reaffirmed that sharing resources could build trust between worlds. He placed a hand on a stone near the water's edge, signaling caution. "Only take what you need," he said solemnly. "My people, this place is sacred." The translator echoed the words. Both humans nodded in understanding. Without wasting another moment, Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao bent down and carefully filled a small container. They moved slowly, treating each drop like liquid gold. Ravu watched quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and concern. Pride because his desert held hidden wonders. Concern because he had broken a deep-seated rule by leading outsiders here. Still, seeing the humans' humble gratitude gave him some reassurance. They were not here to pillage or harm. They were simply surviving. After they collected enough water to last a few days, the three of them settled around the pool, exhausted from the trek. The sound of dripping water against stones felt soothing, almost musical. Captain Lane removed a small device from a pouch, placing it in the water. Specialist Zhao explained in halting phrases that it was a purifier, designed to remove harmful bacteria or chemicals. Ravu, eyes shining with curiosity, watched as the device glowed faintly. Moments later, the water shimmered more brightly, appearing even clearer than before. Satisfied, the humans exchanged a grateful smile. Ravu felt his heart lift. Together, they had reached this hidden oasis, a small victory in a vast, unforgiving desert. As the moon climbed higher, they settled around a small fire Captain Lane started with a heat module. No one spoke for a while. They simply listened to the soft trickle of water and the gentle crackle of the makeshift fire. In that quiet moment, Ravu realized they had taken the first steps towards something new. Strangers had become allies, and the desert had opened a small door to trust. Whatever came next, repairs to the spaceship, further desert dangers, or challenges from Ravu's own tribe, they would face it together. And for the first time in his life, as he stared at the alien faces across the firelight, Ravu felt a spark of hope that there were bigger worlds out there, waiting to be discovered. Arrival at an ocean world. The night felt endless in the desert, but it was also strangely peaceful. Ravu, Captain Lane, and Specialist Zhao sat around the dying embers of their small fire near the hidden oasis. The gentle trickle of water soothed them, reminding everyone that even in a harsh world, small miracles existed. A few hours ago, the humans had carefully collected and purified enough water to fill several sturdy containers. Now they needed to decide their next move. Specialist Zhou broke the silence first. Adjusting the translator device, she spoke softly. "We must fix our ship. It needs water, for cooling systems, and to clean critical parts." The mechanical voice repeated her words in Ravu's language, pausing over certain technical terms that had no direct translation. Ravu leaned forward, eyes reflecting the glow of the last glowing embers. "I will guide you back," he answered. "But we must be careful. My people do not like strangers." Even so, he felt an unexpected loyalty to these humans. They had risked everything to come here, and they had treated the desert's resources with respect. Captain Lane nodded and stifled a yawn. The long day of travel and the sandstorm had taken its toll. Quietly, the three settled into a light sleep, each drifting off with their own thoughts. The next morning, a pale dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in soft gold. Ravu rose first, dusting off the thin layer of sand that clung to his cloak. Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao soon stirred, blinking in the early light. They shared a brief, silent meal of the humans' compressed food bars, washing them down with sips from their replenished water supply. Ravu led them back through the narrow valley, up the rocky plateau, and over the reformed dunes. By midday, they finally reached the spot where the human spaceship lay half-buried. Already the sun blazed overhead, and waves of heat shimmered across the sand. Captain Lane surveyed the craft, lips pressed tight. The metal hull was scratched and scorched from both atmospheric entry and the recent sandstorm. Specialist Zhao walked around the perimeter, scanning the exterior with a handheld device. Ravu stood back, watching with fascination and concern. He had never imagined a craft like this could soar among the stars. After a few minutes, Specialist Joe's face lit up with a hint of excitement. "The ship is still functional," the translator conveyed. "We just need time and water to clean and reset the systems. Then we can fly again." Repairing the vessel, Ravu helped them haul water from the containers they had filled at the oasis. Under the unrelenting sun, they carefully washed away layers of dust and grit, clogging air intakes and cooling vents. Captain Lane inspected internal circuits, occasionally asking Ravu to hand over certain tools. Though Ravu didn't understand all the technology, he recognized the relief on the humans' faces each time a system beeped back to life. Hours stretched on, and the heat pressed down like a giant's hand. Ravu's skin, thick from life in the desert, fared better than the humans' exposed faces. Specialist Joe's cheeks reddened despite the protective suit. Still, they persisted, driven by the hope of taking flight. By late afternoon, faint whirs and hums from the ship signaled that the engines were responding. "Almost done," Captain Lane muttered, the translator confirming his words. "If we succeed, we can leave this place soon." Ravu felt a twist in his chest. For all its challenges, the desert was his home. Still, part of him burned with curiosity at the thought of leaving this world behind, even for a moment, to see the cosmic wonders the humans described. An invitation. Finally, just before sunset, the main engine let out a low roar. The ship trembled slightly, as if waking from a deep sleep. Specialist Joe exchanged a triumphant smile with Captain Lane. Ravu shielded his eyes from a sudden burst of sparks, stepping back as the humans ran a quick diagnostic. Within minutes, the roar grew steadier. Then, with an air of solemn gratitude, Captain Lane turned to Ravu. "We owe you our lives," came the translated voice. "Without you, we would not have survived this desert or found the water to fix our craft." Ravu bowed his head slightly, unsure how to respond. In his mind, he heard his tribe's warnings: never trust outsiders. But these humans had shown kindness, shared food, and honored the small oasis. They were not the cruel invaders his people feared. Specialist Joe placed a hand over her heart. "We want to repay you," the translator continued. "If you wish, come with us. See your real ocean." Ravu's heart pounded. Ever since they showed him those holographic images, he had dreamed of witnessing such a vast sea of water. But could he truly leave his homeland? What would his tribe think? He looked to the horizon, remembering the same unchanging dunes, the never-ending struggle for water. A thirst for knowledge and adventure stirred within him. "I want to see it," he said, voice trembling slightly. "But I must return to my tribe soon." "We understand," Captain Lane replied. "We will bring you back. This trip is only a short journey." Ravu nodded, heart racing. His decision was made. Leaving the desert world. With the repairs complete, Captain Lane and Specialist Joe guided Ravu inside the ship. The interior was dimly lit by panels glowing in soft green and white tones. The air felt strangely cool compared to the desert outside. Ravu's legs wobbled as the hatch closed behind him. He had never been inside such a machine before. Specialist Joe ushered him to his seat, then strapped him in carefully. "Takeoff will be rough," the translator explained gently. "But do not be afraid." Ravu's eyes roamed across blinking monitors, tangled cables, and control sticks. He heard the engine's deep hum building in intensity. Through a small window, he could still see the familiar sand and sky of his home. His fingers gripped the seat as the floor vibrated. Slowly, the ship rose above the dunes, blowing sand in all directions. His stomach lurched as the craft accelerated, climbing higher and higher until the desert became a shrinking expanse of gold and brown. Thin clouds whirled past, and soon they were above the atmosphere. Ravu felt a powerful sense of awe and fear. Never had he imagined seeing his entire world laid out beneath him. When Specialist Zhao angled the ship slightly, he caught a glimpse of black space dotted with stars. Captain Lane set coordinates, and the ship angled away from the planet. "We have enough fuel and resources to make one short jump," the translator said. "We'll show you a planet of oceans, then return you home." Touchdown on a blue planet. After a period of silent travel, Ravu found it difficult to measure time and space. The ship began descending through another atmosphere. His ears popped, and he sensed a rush of cooler air from the vents. As soon as the clouds parted, he saw a breathtaking sight, an endless expanse of blue water, shimmering under a bright sun. Islands and coastlines appeared like patterns of green and brown. Ravu's mouth dropped open. No words came. Here was the ocean the humans spoke of, a glittering blanket of water that seemed to extend forever, like a dream or a legend. He remembered how a tiny amount of water had transformed his life in the desert. Now he was seeing more water than he could ever imagine. Captain Lane gently landed the ship on a shoreline. Through the window, Ravu could see waves rolling up to meet a sandy beach. The color was vibrant, and the smell, once the doors opened, was fresh, tinged with salt and a cool breeze. His senses reeled. He had grown up in a place where even a single well was precious. Now water stretched out to the horizon. Stepping down the ramp, Ravu moved unsteadily across the beach. Each wave curled onto the shore, leaving foam behind. He knelt, touching the wet sand in disbelief. When he dipped his fingers in the water, it felt cold and alive. Specialist Zhao and Captain Lane stood nearby, letting him absorb the moment. They smiled softly, remembering how special it must feel to see so much water for the first time. A gentle wave splashed around Ravu's ankles. He laughed, an unfamiliar sound in his throat, surprised by the sensation. In the distance, seabirds called, flying in playful arcs over the ocean. For a long time, he simply stared, heart pounding with the reality that worlds like this existed, a place where water was not just a hidden treasure but an abundant force covering most of the planet. And in that extraordinary moment, standing on a foreign shore with two human companions, Ravu felt the vastness of possibility. He had left his desert behind, if only temporarily, to discover something that surpassed his wildest dreams. He could not wait to learn more about oceans, about stars, and about the strange, wonderful beings who called themselves humans. Underwater adventure. A warm, salty breeze brushed against Ravu's face as he stood on the sandy beach of the ocean planet. The sight of so much water still amazed him. Every slow, steady wave that reached the shore felt like proof of a vast secret, one he had only just discovered. Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao allowed him time to soak in the view, understanding how overwhelming it must be for someone from a desert world. They spent the next day exploring the shoreline. Ravu was fascinated by everything: the way the water sparkled in sunlight, the tiny shells scattered along the sand, and the drifting seaweed that washed up with the waves. He even marveled at the cries of seabirds as they soared overhead. More than once, he asked Captain Lane, "How can there be so much water?" The translator's voice repeated his awe, and Captain Lane would smile, saying, "It covers most of this planet. We call it an ocean." On the second morning, Specialist Zhao approached Ravu with an excited expression. She held a compact bundle of fabric and tubes in her arms. The translator device whirred. "This is diving gear," it explained in Ravu's language. "We can breathe underwater with it. Would you like to see the ocean from below the surface?" Ravu's heart pounded. He remembered how the humans had mentioned swimming, but he could hardly believe such a thing was possible. In his world, water was precious. No one would dream of plunging into it. Yet here, it seemed not only possible but safe and even fun. He hesitated, glancing at the waves. "How can breathing underwater be done?" he asked softly. Captain Lane crouched down, setting an example. "Let us show you," the translator said. He demonstrated how to fit a mask over the face and how a small tank on the back would supply air. The equipment felt strange in Ravu's hands, smooth and flexible, with valves that hissed quietly when tested. With patient gestures, the humans helped Ravu secure the straps. The mask's clear visor covered his nose and mouth, sealing them from the outside air. It felt tight at first, but Specialist Zhao adjusted a buckle to make it more comfortable. Ravu's heart fluttered. He could see everything clearly through the transparent shield, yet he sensed that once he was in the water, he would need to trust the tank for air. "We will stay near the surface," Captain Lane assured him via the translator. "If you feel scared, just signal us to come back up." Ravu gave a shaky nod. A part of him was terrified. What if the gear failed? What if the ocean swallowed him whole? But curiosity sparked within him, recalling the excitement he felt when he first saw this alien sea. He wanted to experience more, to understand what life was like beneath the waves. They waded in slowly. The water felt cool against Ravu's desert-hardened skin, and his heart pounded even faster as it rose to his waist. With each step, the ocean lapped around him, playfully tugging at his legs. Specialist Zhao went ahead, demonstrating how to hold the respirator in place. She placed her head below the surface for a moment, then came up, smiling, showing it was safe. Finally, Ravu took a deep breath through the mask. The air tasted clean, but carried a slight metallic tang from the tank. Then he dipped his head underwater. At first, he panicked, instinctively holding his breath. But as he remembered the instructions, he forced himself to breathe out slowly, feeling the cool rush of oxygen enter his lungs through the mouthpiece. He opened his eyes wide. A whole new world revealed itself. Light from above danced through the water in shimmering ribbons, illuminating the ocean floor. Small fish darted around his legs, curious about the intruders. Clusters of coral-like structures stood firm beneath the waves, swaying gently in the current. The silence underwater was broken only by the soft bubbling of air escaping Ravu's mask. For a moment, he forgot his fear, enthralled by the beauty all around him. Captain Lane hovered nearby, giving Ravu a thumbs up. Specialist Zhao pointed at a school of colorful fish passing by. They glowed in vivid blues and yellows, each one flicking its tail in harmony. Ravu reached out cautiously, laughing soundlessly as the fish scattered at his movement. The translator device remained on the shore, so no words could be exchanged down here, yet he felt an immediate bond with his human companions. Together, they floated in wonder. With each minute, Ravu's confidence grew. He practiced kicking his legs to propel himself forward, copying Captain Lane's smooth motions. It felt strange at first. His body wasn't used to being surrounded by water. But he soon found a rhythm. The mask stayed secure, and breathing through the respirator became almost natural. As they ventured a bit deeper, the sunlight dimmed, but Ravu could still see incredible sights. Long fronds of sea plants waved like curtains in a gentle breeze. Small crustaceans scuttled along the sandy bottom, leaving tiny trails behind them. A large, curious turtle-like creature swam by, studying the trio with round, shining eyes before drifting away into the blue. Every direction they turned offered something new, more life and color than Ravu had thought possible in the universe. The water felt both heavy and comforting, as if it held him in a soft embrace. In that moment, he remembered his people's harsh existence in the desert. The endless heat, the struggle for water, the daily fight to survive. Here, it seemed water was everywhere, enough to drown in, enough to live in. He felt humbled by the realization that different worlds held different truths. Suddenly, Specialist Zhao pointed upward, signaling it was time to resurface. They kicked toward the light, and soon their heads broke through the waves. Ravu blinked in the bright afternoon sun, breathing through his mask for a moment before carefully removing it. A salty breeze caressed his face, and he tasted the ocean on his lips. "That was amazing," he said in halting words, voice trembling with excitement. The translator device, kept near the shore, wasn't nearby to repeat his words in English. But from the smiles on Captain Lane's and Specialist Zhao's faces, it was clear they understood his awe. They guided him toward the beach, where they removed their gear and spread it out to dry. Ravu collapsed onto the sand, chest rising and falling with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. His mind raced with questions. How do the fish survive? How do the plants grow underwater? Why is there so much life below the surface? The questions felt endless, each one a door opening to a larger world. As Captain Lane fetched the translator device, Ravu gazed out at the sea, waves gently rolling in. How could he ever return to his desert planet and explain all this to his tribe? He imagined telling them about breathing underwater, about brilliant fish and coral, about the quiet beauty of the undersea realm. Many would call him mad. Yet he felt change, more alive than ever before. When the translator finally crackled to life, Specialist Zhao spoke quietly. "You did great," it said. "We are proud of you. It is not easy to brave something so strange." Ravu smiled, turning his gaze from the vast ocean to his two human friends. "Thank you," he replied softly. "I never believed I would see such wonders." Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao exchanged a satisfied look. The day was not over yet. Perhaps they would explore more coves or show Ravu a reef filled with even greater marvels. For now, though, they simply sat in the sunshine, letting the gentle sounds of the surf wash over them. In that peaceful moment, Ravu realized that trust and curiosity had led him to an unimaginable experience. He had traveled far from home, seen the impossible, and learned that life could blossom even beneath the waves. The desert might still call him back, but his heart now carried a piece of this watery world. And he knew, as he sat there among friends, that the universe held endless surprises, some hidden in the sands and others hidden under the sea. New understanding and big reveal. Ravu had never felt such a mix of wonder and sadness as he did when he stepped off the human ship onto the hot sands of his homeworld again. The desert sun blazed overhead, the same unforgiving heat he had known all his life. Yet somehow, everything felt different now. He had seen an ocean world, touched its water, breathed beneath its waves, and discovered how vast and varied life could be. Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao exited the craft behind him, carefully shielding their eyes from the glaring sunlight. They both carried small packs of supplies, unsure of what to expect. Ravu wondered if his tribe would accept them. He could almost hear his elders' voices. Outsiders mean danger. But the humans had proven otherwise. They had saved each other's lives, sharing water and trust in the face of a cruel desert. As they trekked across the dunes, heading toward Ravu's village, the air felt charged with possibility. The humans now understood how harsh this environment was, even with their advanced suits. Each step sank into loose sand, making the journey long and tiring. Above them, the sun appeared like a raging furnace. Sweat dripped down Specialist Zhao's forehead, and Captain Lane's breathing grew heavier. Finally, the rocky outline of Ravu's settlement came into view, perched on a low rise where stone outcroppings offered some natural shade. Scattered dwellings made of clay and desert rock formed a small community. Smoke curled from a single cooking fire. A few villagers stood guard, their eyes widening in alarm at the sight of two strangers walking beside Ravu. Nerves fluttered in Ravu's stomach. His people rarely saw off-worlders, and never so close to the heart of their territory. He raised a hand in a gesture of peace. The guards hesitated, looking from Ravu's determined gaze to the strange figures in metallic suits. With a reluctant nod, they allowed the three to pass. Confrontation and surprise. Inside the village, curious onlookers gathered. Children peeked from behind walls. Elders stood with stern faces, their robes fluttering in the dusty breeze. Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao removed their helmets, offering tentative smiles. A hush fell over the crowd, broken only by low murmurs of confusion. Ravu took a deep breath and announced, "These travelers helped me survive. They saved my life, and I saved theirs. They come as friends. His words echoed in the still air. Some villagers muttered their doubts, but none stepped forward to object. Then, from a nearby shelter, the tribe's elder, an ancient figure with silver hair and sun-worn skin, emerged. The elder leaned on a carved wooden staff, peering at the humans with cautious curiosity. Ravu bowed his head respectfully. "Elder, they have knowledge we do not. They come from a world of oceans, where water is abundant." He paused, searching for the right words. "They wish to share ideas. Maybe we can learn from each other." The elder's sharp eyes flickered between Ravu and the humans. After a long silence, the elder turned to Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao, speaking in a measured tone. The translator device crackled as it hung from Specialist Zhao's belt, interpreting the elder's question. "How can you help us if your world is so different?" "A gift of knowledge." Captain Lane stepped forward, voice soft yet firm. "On our journey, we have gathered technology and ideas. We know ways to collect water from the air, to store it underground, and to clean it so it's safe for drinking. We can teach you if you wish." The elder's expression shifted from suspicion to guarded hope. Many in the crowd fell silent, absorbing the possibility that these strangers offered more than empty promises. Ravu glanced around, recalling how his tribe struggled daily to keep their wells from drying up. Could the humans' technology truly make life easier? Specialist Zhao produced a small cylindrical device from her pack. It had vents on the side and a solar panel on top. "This tool condenses moisture," explained the translator. "Even in dry air, it can gather small amounts of water each day if placed in sunlight." She walked carefully to a nearby flat rock and set the device on it. The cylinder began to emit a faint hum, drawing a few gasps from the onlookers. Ravu's chest swelled with admiration. The humans were not here to conquer. They were here to help. He turned to the elder, seeing a spark of wonder on the wise face. "Elder," he said, "I have witnessed their world. The oceans stretch beyond the horizon. If they can share even a fraction of that abundance, our people might thrive." A cautious agreement. The elder nodded slowly, pressing wrinkled fingers against the staff. The translator repeated an answer. "We accept your offer of knowledge, but we must do it slowly. We cannot risk our ways of life without understanding all the consequences." Captain Lane dipped his head in respect. "We understand," said the mechanical voice. "We will show you only what you wish to learn. Then we will leave, or stay as friends if you decide." A wave of relief washed over Ravu. He saw the tension in the crowd ease. The tribe had long clung to its old traditions, but the elder recognized an opportunity to adapt, to survive in a changing world. Another elder stepped forward, offering a symbol of welcome, a bowl carved from desert stone. Carefully, the humans accepted it, each taking a tiny sip from the tribe's communal well. Sharing water was the deepest sign of trust here. Farewell and the future. In the days that followed, Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao worked with Ravu and other villagers to install condensation units around the settlement. They taught how to maintain them, how to store water, and how to keep the devices powered by sunlight. Small improvements, but to the desert dwellers, it felt like a miracle. Ravu walked the village paths with a renewed sense of hope. He saw children gathering around the hum of a condensation unit, amazed by the trickle of water appearing in the collection tray. Elders, once skeptical, nodded in quiet respect. Life was still hard in the desert, but a door to change had opened. Eventually, the day came for Captain Lane and Specialist Zhao to depart. Their repaired ship awaited beyond the village. A small crowd assembled to bid them farewell. The elder approached them, staff tapping the ground in a steady rhythm. "You have earned our gratitude. May your journey be safe among the stars." Captain Lane bowed. "We will return if you allow," the translator said. "We hope to learn from you too, about life in the desert and the strength of your people." Ravu accompanied them to the craft. As the ramp lowered, he hesitated, feeling a sudden ache in his chest. During their short time together, he had formed a bond with these off-world friends. They had shown him an ocean world, opening his eyes to what lay beyond the dunes. Specialist Zhao offered a gentle smile. "Keep exploring," the translator said. "Whether in the desert or the sea, there is always more to discover." She pressed a small data crystal into his hand, maps, pictures, and lessons about their ocean world. Ravu clasped it tightly, a silent promise that he would never forget what he had seen. The ship lifted off in a swirl of sand, engines humming in the hot air. Ravu shielded his face, watching as it rose higher and higher, then vanished into the sky. The desert once again fell quiet, the wind carrying only whispers of possibility. Turning back toward his village, Ravu felt a surge of determination. The future of his people might be brighter than anyone had dared hope. They had found new friends among the stars, and with friendship came knowledge. Enough to create oases where none had existed before. He looked at the data crystal in his hand, remembering the vast, blue expanse of water he once thought impossible. Strange how the universe works, he murmured to himself, stepping onto the hot sand. A desert dweller, learning from an ocean world. And with that final thought, Ravu began walking home, knowing that his journey, like the desert itself, was far from over. The dunes shifted beneath his feet, but his heart remained steady, lit by the spark of newfound hope.